Welcome. Here are four things every giver should know. I'm the serial intellectual, author of 10 books, two recently released, Metamorphic Dictus and BU Encouragements for Authenticity. I've had the privilege of working in organizations for over 30 years, for profit, nonprofit, religious, non religious, medical practices. And one thing is true: givers are often unhealthy, unhappy, frustrated, angry, feeling misunderstood, lonely, and feel unappreciated, and overall feel like they give more than they get. Is that you? I know I felt that way. These are four things I wish I knew. Number one, whether or not you're a giver. Now, some of us will just naturally say, well, of course I'm a giver. Well, it's not so easy. Let's see if you really are one. Here's some characteristics of a giver. Number one, you take risks for others, you sacrifice for others, you go without for others, you give more than you receive. It's just a fact. You work to get in order to give. Simultaneously, while all those things are true, here are some other characteristics that for sure make you a giver. You have a hard time receiving. You have a hard time when others sacrifice for you. You have a hard time investing in yourself. You have a hard time having things when others don't have them. And you have a hard time taking a risk on yourself. And finally, you have a hard time being honest about what you need. Any of those resonate with you? Many of those resonate with you? Then you are a giver. Number two, how did you become a giver? You ever thought about that? And why is it important? Well, if it's important to know whether you really are a giver or not, because some people are self-deceived. They think they're givers and they're not. But you are a giver. Knowing how you became a giver is a big part of you becoming a healthier giver and a happier giver. So, what are some of the ways that you may have become a giver? Number one, predisposition. What do I mean by that? You were kind of put together like that. You came out of the womb just predisposed to give. Another one that may be family of origin. What do I mean by that? How you grew up. For me, I saw my mother sleep on a couch her whole life. Never saw her sleep in a bed. So she was giving by nature. So what did I think? Well, I need to be something like that, right? Some of you went through a lot of trauma in your family of origin. Maybe someone got hurt. Maybe you had to take care of someone. Maybe you were firstborn. Maybe you were the youngest. Maybe you had to be the bridge between all of your family dysfunction and broker peace. Maybe you had to cook. Maybe you had to clean. Maybe you had to work at an early age. Maybe you felt like the weight and the welfare of the family all fell on you. And you know what you learned in all that? To be a giver. To be a giver. Now, some of you have also exaggerated fear, shame, and guilt. And this also propels you to be givers. How so? Well, you're afraid of what people might say about you and what they might think about you and how they might treat you. So you overcompensate by giving. Maybe it's shame, which is an identity based emotion that you're not enough. So you overcompensate by giving. Or maybe it's guilt, the fact that, hey, I feel bad about what I haven't done and what I should have done and what I did do that wasn't right. So you compensate by doing a lot of stuff and giving. But there's another one. There's a dopamine associated with giving. Yes, when you give, it feels good. And it can become like a drug, addicting behavior. I wouldn't know anything about that, but it might be true of you. Nah, I know a lot about that. And there's another reason that perhaps is contributing to you being a giver, and it's simply this: you're good at it and you get rewarded for it, and it makes you feel good. And so you're like, man, it's the one thing in my life that I'm really good at. I don't really feel like I'm great at work. I don't really feel like I'm great in my relationships. I'm kind of stuck in my career. I'm trying to start this business. I'm struggling to get this and I'm struggling with these wounds. But when it comes to giving, man, I am the Michael Jordan of giving.
Harry did it!
Some of us feel like that. So we do it a lot. And lastly, some of us have a low sense of self worth. And so to again compensate for that, we give. Now, what are some problems we face as givers? And this is important too, because you can't solve a problem till you understand a problem. Here's some problems. One, you may often feel like you outgive others. In other words, you're giving more than you receive. Now, I want to talk to you a little bit about this and have you take into consideration some things about this, some things that I've thought through and worked with people over the last 2 to 3 decades. Here's something to consider and when you feel this way. Number one, could it be that this issue of inequity, that you're giving more than you received, it's just true? And there's not much that can be done about it. Like, you give more than you receive. Now, before you go, Steve, well, that's depressing. Well, I mean, think about it. I don't mean to use bad analogies, but some of them are very clear. You know, when a baby is born, it's very dependent. And a parent, as many of you are, you give to your child. And our expectations are, most of us, that as our children grow, they're able to reciprocate more and more and more as they grow. But no one expects a 6-month-old or a 6-year-old to be able to reciprocate in the way that a 30 or 40-year-old does, right? So could it be a simple case of that? I feel like I'm giving more than I'm getting. Well, it could be. And that might never change. And the issue may be that you're in a relationship where that's just the reality. And you say, well, I don't want to be in a relationship. Then if it's wise and prudent and moral, according to your moral landscape, get out graciously, right? But sometimes we want these idyllic worlds that don't really exist. In the real world, givers often give more than they receive. And that's just the reality. And the healthy and happy ones have come to embrace that, right? Number two, it could be that you're so busy giving that you don't have room to sit down and receive. I'm just saying. It also could be that people perceive that you're so good at giving that you must have your whole life put together. I mean, this person's always up and fixing and doing and working and giving and shucking and jiving. They don't have any weaknesses. Look at them. They're like superheroes.
Assemble.
And thus people go, I don't really see a place to give to them. And a lot of givers don't exactly declare their needs because they don't want to give up the leverage and the positions of giving. And so people are like, well, I don't really see a way. And then there's a fourth reason, and it could just be the reality that, hey, we're going to give. And sometimes we measure people's giving by our giving. So sometimes it's not that we're not receiving, it's just that we're not getting what we want in the way we want. And now we're evaluating other people's giving. And sometimes that leads us to the idea that we're not giving. Some challenges. But here's another challenge we face: feeling exhausted and empty. You ever felt that? You ever been there? Givers often feel exhausted and empty, tired. Whenever I hear someone say, I'm tired, I almost always assume they're probably a giver. Not always, but they are. And when they say, I feel empty, like there's no gas in the tank, there's no emotional and spiritual and physical and mental resources left, I feel like I've spent them all on others, which is common for givers. They feel exhausted and empty. And another thing that they feel as well, third thing they feel, is that thinking that no one cares about them. No one cares about them. This is very common feelings and thoughts. But another one is, for givers, is they can sometimes, because of the things I've mentioned, indulge in harmful coping mechanisms. Harmful coping mechanisms. Is that you? Harmful coping mechanisms. That's been me. Harmful coping mechanisms. Fifth, another challenge that givers face is being temperamental. Why? Because let's be honest, sometimes we give and it's like the stock market. We give and we expect the relational stock to go where? Up. And when it's static or goes down, we ain't happy. We're temperamental, right? And by the way, when we give, we're often giving thoughtfully and emotionally, and that can be quite a roller coaster with us, right? The very things that are used to make us givers can be the enemies of our moods, right? Here's a sixth thing that givers often are challenged with, and that is maintaining a healthy and loving and beneficial relationship with those who are closest to them. You see, when a giver is upset, when a giver feels slighted, when a giver is frustrated, do you know who they tend to tell? The people closest to them. Do you know who they tend to not tell? The people they give the most to. As a rule, that's what happens. So what happens is the people who are closest to them and actually do love them, that relationship can come under a severe storm, if you will, because the givers are now taking things out on the people close to them. And what that does is it creates barriers for them to even have a healthy and loving relationship with the people who love them the most, because they're taking out all their frustration on the people who are closest to them. These are some of the challenges that givers face. They're real. And the seventh and last one is finding joy. It's amazing how we as givers, as you as a giver, giving is such an amazing thing. It says in the Bible, it's better to give than to receive. It's such an amazing thing. And yet so many of us are so challenged to find joy in our giving. So how do we fix all this? This is the fourth part. How can we become more holistically healthy and resourceful? By doing the following things. One, by becoming more self-aware. You say, of what? Of all the things I just talked about, particularly of the greatest contributing forces that made you a giver, because some of those things are exaggerated, particularly predisposition can get exaggerated, family of origin can get exaggerated, trauma can be undealt with and unhealed and create kind of a morphing. And what this can do is it can just exaggerate itself so that you're not functioning in the healthiest way possible. There's only one way to change, and that's to become aware of the need to. So one of the most effective ways for you to become a healthier and a happier giver is to become aware of, how did this all start? Where is this coming from? What are the thoughts, emotions, scenarios, and narratives that I'm telling myself that are fueling my giving? And are they healthy and balanced and helpful? Number two, we need to be avoiding the exaggerations that are associated with being givers, like making it your primary identity. Well, I'm a giver. No, that's something you do. Yeah, but I'm a giver by nature. If you make giving your primary identity, you're going to have a lot of problems. A lot of problems, because you're more than what you give. You are much more than that. You are much, much more. And also another exaggeration that's closely attached to this identity of giving when it gets all messed up is the whole idea when you start giving to get, right? Giving out of fear. These are the exaggerations amongst many that come, and we need to avoid those. But here's something else we need to do if we're going to be happy and healthy as giver, and that is we got to confront the things within that are preventing us from being the most healthy and happy and resourceful giver. Giving is beautiful. The world's full of givers. The world needs givers. The world needs way more givers, but we need healthy givers like you. We need healthy and holistically resourceful givers. And that means sometimes we have to confront the things within that are keeping us from being that. Here's a fourth thing we need to do, and this one's hard. Givers have a hard time doing this, and that's recognizing your limitations. Yes, if you're a giver, you have limitations. You have only so much money, so much time, so much emotional, spiritual, physical, and mental resources to give. And then you run out, and they've got to be refueled. And when givers don't recognize their limitations, they push past boundaries, and there's all manner of relational dysfunctions that take place. So setting proper boundaries and know thy limits. Alfred told Batman that. He didn't listen. Here's another thing we need to do, and that is embrace our needs. Yeah. Givers Embracing their needs is almost like, ew, my need is to give. No, you have legitimate needs and you need to embrace them. You need to hug them and you need to be close to them and you need to understand them and you need to see to it that they are regularly met, like sleep, silence, solitude, refueling, activities and things that recharge you and put more physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual resources in your bank that you can spend on others. Here's another one that we need to do that we don't like to do as givers, and that is fasting from giving. Yeah, I said it. You know what fasting is? Most people don't fast. Most people don't fast. We need to fast from giving. There are times when you just need to not give, and you're going to feel horrible. You're going to feel selfish and weird, and oh my gosh, and but you need to fast. It's a healthy practice. Here's another one that would help. How about going to that gym, the physical, emotional, spiritual, and mental gym, and building up your endurance? You say, for what? So that you can endure the sights and sounds of other people suffering because their needs aren't met. Yeah. You know what healthy and happy givers do? They can watch other people go without, and they're okay. Unhealthy and unhappy people cannot do that. They cannot bear the thought. You know what that is? That's called an addiction. It's just passed over because they're giving, and so they get a pass. But in 9 cases out of 10, there's some dysfunction latent in there that is either birthed or bearing fruit in there. We have to be able to do it. Why? Because we have to be able to believe that this is another one that when people don't have their needs met, it's not the end of the world. In fact, something that would help us become a healthy and happy giver is trusting that when people don't have their needs met, it can actually help them and bless them and change them and be a benefit to them. So if you're always rushing in as a giver, there is a high likelihood that you're stunting other people's developmental process, because we all know the greatest catalyst for personal development and change, pain. And if we're always rushing in to make sure no one feels anything, which is an absolute, it's just rampant in our generation. We can't stand anyone being without any needs. That's not a healthy trait. A healthy giver is able to know it's time to fast. It might be good for this person to go without for a time. And they're okay with it because they trust that when they're not giving, the process is still working. See, they know that they're not solely responsible for another person's happiness, their welfare, or their development, that circumstances and everything's going to work in that person's life, including when they fast and when they don't give. The world's bigger than them. Healthy and happy givers know this. And here's the last one. Healthy and happy givers, you know what they're going to do? They're going to establish habits and a practice of giving to themselves. Yep. They're going to establish these habits and practices of giving to themselves. These are the 4 things I wish I knew. Now you know them. May you practice them, and may you be a healthy and happier giver. Grace and peace.